My name is Kelley. I am with a company by the name of Competentum. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about WebRTC and education. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give an overview of some of the current trends that are happening in the education space right now, where WebRTC can make a big difference in terms of the way education is being developed. And I also want to share with you some of the details around a new product that we're developing called SetToMe, which is designed to address a number of these different challenges. So right now, if you look at the education space, there's a lot of interesting things going on. And one of the big things that's been going on for a number of years that have really accelerated recently is that we estimate that roughly half of all courses will be taught online beginning in 2019, which is next year. So the number of students who are actually coming to a campus to get, to take classes is diminishing quite a bit. Also, if you look at the services that are being offered at a number of campuses, they're decreasing quite a bit at this time. It used to be, if a student needed to get help for guidance counseling or tutoring or things like that, there was a tutoring center they can go to, and the funding for those things are becoming less and less prevalent. But also, in terms of trying to build out platforms to do everything virtually, it can be quite expensive to try to do a number of these different, try to do a very complex build. So right now, one of the common trends of what's happening in the education space is that the mentoring model is really taking off at this point. And what I mean by mentoring model is that if I'm a student who wants to learn from someone who's an expert in the field, there's a large number of people who are considered themselves to be mentors or experts in the field that are able to connect with an individual and give them the help that they want. And it's really taking place in a number of different areas. One of the big ones is language learning. So there's a number of people overseas who want to learn how to speak English as a second language because they need that skill to be successful in business. And rather than practicing with someone in their own country who is who's speaking English as a second language as well, they prefer to learn from someone here in the United States or in England who speak English as a first language. Other areas that are really big right now are tutoring, career services, guidance counselor, and there's many, many more use cases of where students want to get mentoring from experts to help them in their education. So the old model is pretty straightforward. These services were being offered face-to-face. And the schools would have very large centers for tutoring and career services and things like this to give students the help that they needed when they come up. However, there's a couple of things that are going on when it comes to that. The biggest one being is that, as I mentioned earlier, is that budget cuts are really impacting the budgets to be able to offer these types of things. Another big thing, which I did not include on this slide, is that most of these services are offered from 9 to 5 p.m. Most students, when they're doing their work, we find are doing them from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. in the morning. So a number of these services that students need, particularly in the tutoring space, they're just not available when most students are trying to work through a problem and trying to get help. So the new model is offering everything virtually. And instead of having full-time employees, quite often what we're seeing is that a lot of these companies are having a remote pool of independent contractors who are experts in their fields to be able to offer these types of services. So instead of having to rely on people on campus, they can hire people literally all over the globe who can come in and provide these services to students. If this sounds familiar, this is a trend that is taking place in a lot of different industries right now. One that really stands out is Uber. Uber is set up in such a way where we have people who want rides, and then they have a pool of people who are willing to offer those rides. So one of the big things in terms of trying to offer these types of services is the need to have proprietary platforms. So when you look at a lot of early stage companies who are just trying to test out their business concept, it's very easy to do. You can do these sessions on Skype. You can do these sessions on Google Hangouts. But if you're trying to build an actual company or trying to build an actual service, they leave a lot to be desired. And I'm not saying that Skype and Google Hangouts are bad products, but in terms of building a product, there's a lot of holes. The biggest one being is that students are leaving your actual product. So when a student wants to get some type of service, you're sending them to Skype or Google Hangouts, and they're leaving your site. So you're not getting that stickiness in terms of a person wanting to come to your site over and over again. But also when it comes to things like billing, scheduling, all of these things are being done manually. And it also, what we also see that a lot of revenue is being left on the table. We've seen a number of situations where a student has bought, say, 30 minutes of tutoring, a person spent actually 2 hours with that person, and they're leaving 90 minutes on the table in terms of billing that did not occur because there was no time tracking taking place. Another big thing is that we see a lot of side deals taking place. If I'm a tutor and I see you in the front audience, then I want to connect with you, I'm going to say, hey, why are we going through this service? Why don't we do this one-on-one and try to connect and try to eliminate the middleman? So what's happening is that there's a number of companies right now that are building out products to do this. And the number one thing that they're doing to build these services is they're embedding WebRTC right into their platform. So therefore, the actual services are being offered in their website. They're not sending students to a separate place. And they're also including things to automate the process for things like billing and scheduling, and things where they were typically being done manually by a person and now being replaced by technology. One of the very interesting things that we see right now is that if you look at the ed tech space in terms of funding coming from venture capitalists, of the top 10 deals that took place in 2017, 4 of them fell into this, what I call mentoring model type business. 2 of which were companies that were trying to teach English to people overseas to speak to native speakers, and the other 2 were tutoring companies. So there's a lot of high valuations going on in the ed tech field for this type of business. So right now, we see there being 3 challenges when trying to build a proprietary platform around these different things. The first one is custom building a platform. Secondly, which I'll spend a little bit of time discussing, is selecting a media server. And then third but not least is education has a lot of special use cases that you don't necessarily see in other fields. So when you look at custom building a platform, it is fraught with a lot of challenges, because what we see in a lot of cases when you try to build something from scratch, you're having to, basically you have to invent everything. And the results of doing this are often unknown, but more importantly, the costs are very high. So there's a lot of risk involved in trying to build a proprietary platform from scratch. Secondly, when it comes to selecting a media server, in order to do WebRTC, as Chad mentioned earlier in his presentation, you need to have some type of server in the background to process all the things that are happening with WebRTC. And there are 2 ways that you can go with this. The first one is that there are open source WebRTC APIs that you can use to basically host and develop your own server to do these different types of things. It's easy in the sense that there are open source products that are out there and you can host this stuff on your own, but also you have to do all the work on your own. You have to do the maintenance, you have to do the provisioning yourself. And if you're a young company, or if you don't have this expertise, it's very challenging to do. On the other hand, you have companies that are out there that have basically built WebRTC APIs that you can basically buy into. They're going to do all the work for you, provide the SLAs, they're going to do all the maintenance, you don't have to deploy anything. But the con to this in many cases is that you have to essentially pay monthly fees to these companies. And depending on the amount of volume that you have, those fees can be very small or very large. And there are companies like TalkBox or Red 5 Pro, like Chris Allen's company, that provide this type of service, so you don't have to do any of this yourselves. And this is one of the key questions that you need to answer very early on as you try to go about doing this type of work. And last but not least, when you look at tutoring, particularly when you're dealing with math and science disciplines, the tutor wants to be able to interact with the student in a way in solving a problem that requires a lot of going back and forth. And when you start bringing in things like math and physics and chemistry that bring in a lot of mathematical symbols, it's very challenging to develop something that's really going to take advantage of those things, because things like pi and square root don't exist on the keyboard. So what have we done at Competentum? We have built a product called SetToMe. And what SetToMe is essentially it's a collaboration solution that an SDK that we've built on top of WebRTC. So it provides real-time interaction plus extension and plugins to extend the behavior, but it also allows you to develop your own solution and integrate it with your platform. So what do I mean by that? So essentially, so let's think of this analogy right now. So let's say I buy a house, and when I buy a house, it comes with all the electricity, the plumbing, all of that stuff built in, the commonly used tools that you're going to use when you have to buy a house. However, I want to customize this to be my own house. When it comes to things like the counters, the cabinets, the dishwasher, things like that, I want to buy those things on my own to truly make it my own. So what we've done with SetToMe is that we've pre-built modules around some of the common things that you're going to use in a system for tutoring or in the education space around WebRTC. Things such as a whiteboard, chat, file upload. These are all things that need to exist in a number of these systems. And as a company, if you now want to build your own product, you can take our IP and essentially build on top of that. So if you want to have whiteboard functionality out of the box that's going to work, we're going to provide that with SetToMe. If you want to customize it in any kind of way, you can do that as well. Meanwhile, if you need to build any kind of new interactions to build out your platform and truly make it your own, we're providing your APIs and an SDK that allows you to build these things and truly make it your own. So it's basically having the best of both worlds, and that you have predefined code that allows you to get running much more quickly, but at the same time allows you to do custom development. And what we've done with SetToMe is we've built an abstraction layer on top of the media servers that hides the complexity of dealing with media servers. A lot of times when having to deal with media servers, it can get quite ugly. There's a lot of details that can even trip up the best of developers. And with this abstraction layer, you can do things and not have to worry about dealing with those lower layers. So a little bit about the technology of how SetToMe is built. In terms of the front end, we made the decision to use React as our framework for the front end. So each interaction right now within SetToMe is a separate React component. And we essentially chose React for two reasons. The first reason being is that the front-end logic could be reused to build mobile applications. So we had mobile in mind when we built SetToMe, and we didn't want to have to rewrite the code for the iOS and the Android. For new developers or people who don't necessarily understand the mobile field, what happens in a number of cases is that if you build natively with iOS, that code is not going to carry over to Android. So this allowed us to have one code base that we can reuse several times over. But also, React supports native extensions. And what that allows us to do is to take the WebRTC library by Google and have it work on mobile devices. About the backend right now is built with a combination of different services, Java being the primary one, but we're also using Spring as well as Maven. So what we have is modules that are communicating inside the signaling server, and it takes the commands that are routed to the executors to handle the command to modify the meeting room state, which will be sent to the clients as a response. So we have essentially two different types of modules. We have the common module, which is the utility module. This takes care of commonly used things like auto scaling, auto configuration, endpoint, things like that. And what the idea is to use this module as a dependency. It can be used as a requirement, which will provide all the requirement frameworks and libraries to use and make a new service work out of the box. But then we have the core modules, and the core modules provide the base functionality for SetToMe at this point. So one of the things that we've done when it comes to the WebRTC modules, the core module extension can be made to work with any particular vendor. So right now, when it comes to using the media server, we've got it working with TalkBox and Corrento out of the box. We are looking at other WebRTC providers at this point to get that to happen. So if you're a company who starts with one and then wants to move to another, you can do this pretty seamlessly with the way that we've set things up and being able to move from one WebRTC API to the next. In terms of the interaction modules, each one is provided as a separate plugin because we're using Spring Beans. So like things like whiteboard, chat, things like that could be moved pretty seamlessly. And then we also have a scheduling function that is built into it as well. So how do I customize SetToMe? So a SetToMe is essentially an SDK. And an SDK allows you to do the software development that you want to do in order to make this happen. So if you want to extend an existing module, since everything is based on Java and Spring Bins, it's suitable for modifications of existing features. But let's say you want to create a new plugin module. We set it up right now where you can handle commands coming from the WebSocket and also change the state, but that's for Java only. But let's say you're using another programming language like .NET. You can create a new service using SetToMe, register it, and handle the appropriate commands from the service bus. So it allows you to change the state for room state to notify the clients. Okay, in closing, I want to give you a little bit of an overview of who Competentum is and what we do. So Competentum, we're a company who is a preferred vendor for software development and digital content development for a number of educational publishers and ed tech firms all around the globe. And the reason why they work with us over and over again in the education space, and the thing that really makes our team unique, is that our people who work for us all have degrees in pretty much all the academic disciplines, particularly in math, physics, chemistry, any of the quantitative disciplines. But the thing that really makes our team stand out is the fact that they all have software engineering backgrounds. So a number of these people, not only do they have degrees in math, they also programmed all 4 years of college. And what that did is that it makes them software engineers as well as being domain experts. And the company was founded back in 1993 from a professor of physics, and she essentially worked with Addison Wesley to build the first online physics course. And we got into the whole WebRTC market as a result of our clients coming to us and saying that now that they wanted to build platforms in order to do tutoring and other types of real-time communication. If you want to reach out, if you want to get any kind of demo of the product, here is my contact information. And I'd like to thank you for your time and answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, we have time for 1 or 2 questions. I can hand you a mic, or you can step up.
Hey, Chris. Yeah, I just had a question on, you mentioned Corrento and also TalkBox. And from the open source side of things, are you guys doing anything with selective forwarding units, or is everything multi-point control units?
Good question. I'm not a developer, but I can get you. I can write that down, and I can email you back with that information.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions?
So I was just wondering if you'd been able to apply this to like a whole classroom setting, or like if you have like any future plans for how that might work for like online classrooms, doing like a webcast for like an entire room full of students or distributed students.
That is a great question. Right now, the plan that we're focusing on is more of the mentoring market, and there is a very specific reason when it comes to that, when it comes to WebRTC. And the reason is that when you start bringing on, say, more than 10 users at a given time around WebRTC, because it is peer-to-peer, WebRTC starts to fall down in those situations. And then you need to start bringing in a media server in order to do that type of work. And there are products that are out there that will handle that type of work. But since WebRTC is really restricted to, I would say, sessions of 10 or less, we're not focusing on the classroom situation as a result of that. Good question. Thanks.
Any more? One last one here.
I won't just shout at you. Yeah, so you said that you're supporting WebRTC with your tool?
Correct.
So I use WebRTC. Does this enable me to add whiteboarding features to our product, for example?
Right. So what SetToMe is essentially a set of modules that we've developed that allow you to take features that we've already pre-built out and build them into your product. So if your product doesn't have a whiteboarding feature in it, you can take our whiteboarding module and build that into your product. So therefore, you don't have to recreate the wheel to build that particular functionality. All right. Thank you very much.